Jamil, I'm ready for my close-up.
Shh, it's the Film Flamers.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert.
Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And we're the Film Flamers.
We're bringing you a special 5th week episode. Not every month has a 5th week in it, so what we're doing is we're splitting up our hot takes from our Shooting the Flames episode coming out next week for July, and we're going to give you all of our hot takes that we've been watching just over the last, month or so, and we're going to give it to you now, raw, uncut, in this giant Hot Take-a-Palooza episode.
That's right. Chris and I were looking at our Shooting the Flames episode, and we noticed that a great chunk of it is sort of our recent watches and our recommendations. And we thought, it'd be really good to separate this from that episode and give the movies that we've watched some space to breathe and our recommendations to go to you. And it also gives us a chance to sort of expand our Shooting the Flames so we can talk about more trailers and horror news and possibly even current events and things like that. So let's get into it, because I know that you have watched a lot of movies in June. You have been a very busy boy.
Yes, uncharacteristically. Usually I'm the one that lags behind, but I have watched, let's see, let me count them, 15.
Which is very impressive. It got to a point when I was looking at the document and looking at Letterboxd on all the movies that you watched, and 15 my ass, there's more that you've seen.
I went on a Marvel binge too, so there's 10 more movies that I didn't. So I've watched on average almost 2 movies a day in June.
And I was just what in the actual fuck have I been doing? I haven't watched anything. So over the last week, I've tried to catch up to you. I've watched some movies, but we've
been living your life.
Well, I watched episodic things, and that we'll come up with that in a minute. But yeah, so I mean, you've been very busy, and I'm very proud of your movie watching this month. So, what do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the straight up horror movies.
Okay, good. I like that.
Yeah, so I finally watched Terrified after your recommendation.
Oh, I'm so glad you did.
Oh, and it got me. And movies, I feel like horror movies don't get me anymore. Okay, I don't want to say horror movies don't understand me. I'm saying they don't get me I don't get scared.
Right, okay.
But Terrified got me, and it got under my skin a little bit, and I actually jumped a couple times. I got really creeped out. They have a lot of interesting types of horror. There's equal bombastic as well as subtle horror in Terrified, and I really, really appreciated that. It's just a really well balanced movie in terms of its scare value and its scare tactics. So I don't know. It's really good. I think it's Spanish language.
I mean, either Brazil or Argentina. I can't remember. I mean, but it's a Latin American country that made it. Yeah.
Yeah. Buenos Aires. Yeah. So it's
Argentina. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked Terrified, and I'm so glad that you watched it, because I've, over the movies that I've watched over the last couple of years, it is the one that has scared me the most. And I know that I've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast about how much it scares me. And I'm always happy. I think it's a terrible word to use, but I mean, I'm always happy when somebody else watches it and said, yes, I was terrified. I don't want people to be scared, but I sort of do. And it justifies everything that I have said about this movie when you say that you were scared, Nat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to oversell it. I did give it a 4 stars out of 5.
Good.
That's pretty high for me, So, I was very, very pleasantly surprised and pleased with it. Even after, your, high rating of it, I went in kind of expecting it to be scary, and it was. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad that you watched it. In fact, I would like to talk about this movie more deeply than this, and so I don't want to shoot our wad right now, because I I think that this is a good movie for the Film Flamers to cover. Especially if we both enjoyed it, we both were scared. I think that we can pick the things that we liked the most out of it, and not to mention, I mean, it's an anthology movie, and I mean, I enjoy talking about those. So I watched an anthology horror movie.
Oh, you did?
And it's a Scare Package.
Okay.
Which is something that we had talked about the trailer of on Shooting the Flames several months ago. And I think Shudder purchased it, and they've been showing it. It was just released a couple weeks ago onto Shudder, and it's something I was looking forward to watching. So I pulled it up and watched it right away. And I didn't know that it was going to be such a horror comedy, really. Mm-hmm. But it's 7 short films with a framing device, and it was really good. It was funny and made me laugh a lot. And I think that like fans of like 80s horror are really who they're like trying to target in this. And like most other anthology movies, it's sort of hit or miss, but there were like 3 really good stories in here. And the framing device was very funny. But the last story is what I want to talk about the most. It's sort of like the movie centers around this man who owns a video store, and, you know, they're a dying breed these days anyway. And he's always trying to like hire someone to work there. And he finally hires somebody, and he is like training him. And so each like step of the training process also leads him to a different horror story or short in this movie. But the very, very last one, the owner of that video store gets transported into the horror movie itself. And he's sort of like stuck with all these stock characters that he knows so much about. He's like, oh, so you're the final girl, and like you're the, you know, the slut, or you're the whatever, right? And he's trying to like make his way out of the horror movie himself. And it was just so fucking funny. And I would think that if this movie weren't so hit or miss with its stories, I think like out of the 7, like 3 are really good, 4 are really bad. And it's really close to middle, you know, but I think I gave this movie a 3-star. So it's like sort of middle of the road. But if it had like better stories to like counteract the really good ones, I think it would be a lot higher for me. But it was hilarious. And if you have Shudder, go and watch it, because I know that people who listen to this are like well versed in horror, and that's where a lot of the comedy lies. There's some like meta aspects to it. So it's definitely something that you should watch.
Okay. I also finally watched The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
I saw that on your Letterboxd, but I didn't ask you about it because I knew we'd be talking about it right now.
Yeah. So overall, I really enjoyed it, especially like the first, 3/4 of the movie. It really just has excellent pacing, great visual storytelling. It's creepy, it's excellent acting from Brian Cox. I really, really love him in movies generally, and this is no different. I also really like, what's his name? Who plays his son in that?
Is it Emil Hirsch?
Emil Hirsch, yeah. He was like in Into the Wild and Girl Next Door, a couple other movies that he's very good in. But it kind of falls apart in its final act. I don't really like how it ended. I like dark endings, but this one just kind of fell flat to me without much meaning. And so I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars, despite its like 4.5 star like beginning and middle.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you. I mean, I really like this movie a lot. I know I've sang its praises on this podcast and to you like privately, and for the same reasons that you said. I think the first like 2/3 of this movie are very, very good. I love the way that it's paced. I love the atmosphere that it builds throughout like the start of the movie. And I love the 2 characters a lot. 3, if you want to count, Jane Doe as a character.
Sure.
And I like it. Toward the end, I think it gets a little like twisty, right? But I mean,
yeah, and that's okay. And I kind of wish that they had ended it kind of in a more like The Ring kind of way, where it's, the twist is like, oh, we should have done this or something else. But I mean, instead, everything kind of just ends and closes it. And I don't know. I feel like this movie is well regarded. It's well loved in the horror community. And I think everyone should check it out and judge the ending for yourself.
I think it's well made. I like the quality is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like it seems like a high budget movie for a low budget price, right? And I mean, and the acting is phenomenal. I love Brian Cox in just about anything that I see him in. So, yeah. If we were like talking about putting movies on a docket for future deep dives, would you think Terrified or Autopsy would be one that you would choose?
I feel like I have more to say about The Autopsy of Jane Doe just because I have more problems with it. That I'd like to kind of autopsy dissect, if you will, because I feel like there's certain moments in that film that make it turn and make me kind of turn away from it, and I'd like to kind of explore why, and that might be more of like an issue with me and how I watch movies or enjoy movies and for what reasons versus how a wider audience might react to it. So I'm not sure. But yeah, it might be more interesting to deep dive into Autopsy of Jane Doe. But Terrified is definitely something I could talk about as well in a deep dive.
Which one do you think you'd be most likely to rewatch?
Terrified.
Okay, well. So I watched another horror movie, and, it's June, it's Pride Month, and I wanted to get into some queer horror that I hadn't seen before, and so I decided to watch Midnight Kiss on Hulu. And This is from the Into the Dark Blumhouse series that's on Hulu. So every month they have a movie that's sort of tied into the holiday that's in that month, right? And they're in their second year, so they're really starting to, pick different directors and different stories. And so for January of this year, they released Midnight Kiss, I think on like January the 1st. But it's a movie about these 5 gay friends who have a tradition. Well, 5 gay friends and a straight girl, right? They have a tradition of hanging out on New Year's Eve, and they make a game to where you need to kiss somebody at midnight. And you separate from the group, you find the person that you want to kiss, and you get them to kiss you at any cost, right? You can like flirt with them, seduce them, do whatever you want.
Hashtag me too.
Mm-hmm. Get your midnight kiss, and then you can go home with them for the night. But at the end, come dawn, that's it. Like you don't start a relationship or anything like that. And so on this particular New Year's, as far as the movie's concerned, they go to a house that's owned by one of their friends and go to a gay bar, and they have their midnight kiss, but the friends are sort of getting picked off one by one, like classic stalker style,
Okay.
And, it was good, like I enjoyed it because I enjoy slasher movies, and that's essentially what it was. And I'm always happy to see gay characters on screen. But I think that like Hellbent did this a lot better than this one did. Right. Even though this one seems like more inclusive, so we have like a female character in this movie, and we have like an Asian character. We have an African-American character in this movie, and it's a lot more inclusive than what Hellbent is. And we have different kinds of gay guys, like some mask and some femme. And it's like, that's the reasons that I liked it. But there were some problems. Obviously, I don't think that it was well written. I don't think that, they also try to have some like twisty endings, and it just doesn't really like fulfill itself by the end of it for me, And I went on to Letterboxd, and I know some people who I follow had rated it much higher than I did. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I should watch it again. But like for right now, it's a really fun, like gay horror movie. And if that's all you're looking for, then it's the perfect thing to turn on for Pride Month. I know that by the time this comes out, there's just a couple days left in Pride Month, but we can be prideful all year long and still watch gay horror movies.
Yeah.
So I will say that there's a lot of like male nudity in this movie, but not like there's no peen, they sort of like skirt around the peen. There's a lot of ass and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay. If you're going to be this gratuitous, you might as well like show the whole package,
Did Scare Package show the peen?
Not an actual peen, but there's an axe to the peen.
Oh,
so,
okay.
I don't know. I'm kind of interested to see what you would think about this particular movie, especially since we just watched Hellbent. But yeah, it's good. The guys are hot. And I will say like the most likable character, the most fun character in this movie is the straight girl who hangs out with them, right? Like I felt the most for her. I wanted to see her most in the movie. And I don't know what that says about a gay horror movie, right? But
yeah.
Mm-hmm. But hey, straight girls are part of our lives. We love them. And it was good to have that aspect into the horror movie. So.
Well, speaking of straight girls, I saw Gretel and Hansel as well, finally.
How did you like it?
I actually liked it a lot better than you did. I think you gave it like a 2.5 or something. I gave it a 3.5. Yeah. And it's so well shot. It's so beautifully shot. The production design is so good. All the acting is great. Even the script's all right. It's just the story that kind of sucks, especially towards the end, so I just can't, give it more, but I will be definitely looking at this director, continuing to look at this director. to see where he goes, because Gretel and Hansel, I felt like had a lot of potential there, and it just kind of fell flat at the end. It's just kind of frustrating. At first, when I was first started watching Gretel and Hansel, I was like, this is like a director that doesn't know how to fucking frame a shot or choose a lens. Like, everything was like handheld and fisheyed on the actors, and then it just gets better, right? And better and better and better. And I loved their visual storytelling of like witchcraft and things like that. I liked the subtle fantasy aspects to it. I really do like folk horror. I really like The Witch. I don't know that it's my favorite subgenre of horror, but it's almost like hit or miss. And this is somewhere in the middle for me, but I did give it a 3.5 just because of the production value and the technical and acting achievements, I think, in it. I really enjoyed seeing Alice Krige, AKA the Borg Queen, as the witch in this. And I thought it was an interesting but needless twist at the end.
I liked the visual storytelling in this movie. I think that it was well made and well shot, right? And I think that I said that in that I think it was a Patreon hot take that particular month that we talked about this. And when it came down to the actual story, that's when I had the problem, But I mean, it's a well-made movie and it's beautiful to look at. And I love Oz Perkins. I think that, like The Black Coat's Daughter was very good. It's a recent watch for me. I also like The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. It's something that I talked about when we talked about what to stream during quarantine. I think his movies are really good. And I think that he's well-versed in the slow burn, right? I think that his previous movies are far superior to this particular one.
Yeah, and I don't have that for contrast. One particular scene keeps coming back to me, and it's the scene where the witch is preparing the food that is on the table somehow miraculously, every morning, with there's just tons of biscuits and meats and cheeses and everything else that they could possibly imagine. And she's literally just dumping this pile of guts and intestines and everything else from animals and presumably children, and just kind of waves her hand or whatever, and they all just kind of congeal and morph into the food that they're eating. And you find out where it comes from. And that's such a subtle effect of how it was done. They kind of, all these intros kind of curling in on themselves to become food, that I had to watch it several times. And it's just, it's kind of I would say, one of the most underrated effects I've ever seen.
So since this movie's been released on VOD, I have hovered over it when I've scrolled through Amazon, right? And I'm like, I need to rewatch this because I saw it in the theater. I don't think that was the right experience for me to watch this particular movie. I think this is a home viewing movie that I think I would enjoy it so much better if I watched it from home. And so I will. I think based on the rating that you gave it compared to mine, I think this is something that I need to revisit and just give a second chance to under better circumstances, we'll say. And, see what I think about it later on.
That said, if you don't mind me transitioning into an interesting connected film.
Please do.
Would be the other folk horror movie that I finally saw, which is Hagazusa.
Which is something that I talked about on a Shooting the Flames episode before too, right?
And you actually rated this higher, and I think I rated it lower.
Yeah, I know. This is such an amazing dichotomy of movies for us to talk about.
Yeah, so I rated it a 2.5, and I don't know. I feel like maybe that's a little harsh in hindsight, but again, really well photographed, well made, but it's so bare bones as far as any kind of plot or story. Really, really kind of challenged to create your own narrative and meaning and everything that's going on the screen. And while I think that can be incredibly effective, I don't know that it was here. I feel like it's too subtle for its own good. And I feel like they should have done a little bit more of storytelling in order to kind of bring it home.
I have to agree. I think those are the main problems that I have with the movie as well. Right. I think that, again, this movie is very pretty to look at. And I think it started very strongly, but toward the middle and end, I was just like, okay, I don't think I understand this character very well. And it's been a long time since I've seen it. I was trying to figure out when I logged this movie, but I'm fairly certain I gave it a 3-star. So it's not much higher than what you gave it. But I didn't enjoy watching this movie. I didn't have a good time at all. I think, and there was a really gross scene involving a goat, a milking of a goat, right? And And the more I think about that particular scene, the more I like that scene more than anything else in the movie, right? It's just like, it's something you have to think about. So
I was just like, don't touch Black Phillip like that.
she gets real fucking handsy with that goat, And I was just like, I remember watching that movie and pausing it to go talk to my husband. And I was just like, I'm watching a movie where I'm fairly certain a woman just raped a goat. I was just like, and he was like, what is it? I was like, don't even ask. I was just like, it didn't matter. I was like, that goat did not give any sort of consent. And
Anbrun.
So, I mean, like, I know a lot of people like this movie too. It was well regarded when it came out, and I think it made the film festival circuit. And I don't know that a great majority of people have seen this movie, but I'm super curious to see what people think about it. Like, I knew that eventually you'd make your way to it, and I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it on your list. And so it's just like, this is another one that we're just gonna wait and talk about. I'm not gonna ask you like off mic,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Would you watch this one again?
I don't know. I watched Gretel and Hansel before I watched Hagazusa again.
I mean, like, I kind of want to watch them both again now because
I would watch Hagazusa with like a directorial commentary or something if it was in English.
Oh, yeah.
But it wouldn't be.
So, I mean, like, I watched Hagazusa right around the same time I watched The Field Guide to Evil, right? And I was really looking forward to both of those movies just based on the trailer. And I just didn't get the experience that I wanted to. I didn't like them very much, either one of them. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'd watch it again, but it's been about a year since I've watched it, maybe, and I'm like, it'll be a while longer.
I'm glad they exist. I'm glad they're kind of continuing keeping like folk horror alive, but I feel like both of them are kind of reactions and were made because of the success of The Witch, and neither could live up to that standard.
I 100% agree with that statement. So, I mean, I think that The Witch really set a precedent for what we think about like folk horror and what we want it to look like and feel like and enjoy. And there's going to be people who follow suit. I mean, this is why we have a whole string of movies over a number of years that are the same sort of like subgenre of horror. And I mean, oftentimes they don't like live up to its predecessor's glory, right? But I don't know. I mean, like if somebody else makes another like folk witch movie, I'll still go watch it. So.
Totally. Me too. So I also watched yet another one that you wanted me to watch based on, our mutual interest in The Invitation.
Yes.
And that is Coherence. So I watched the movie Coherence, and I got so pissed off like in the first like half of this movie. I was like, this is a 1 star, a 2 star, because I was just so pissed off that everyone was just so stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, just let it pass, just like go on with your fucking night. Just like, anyway, the movie's about a comet that passes over and it can cause, insanity or weirdness, is the whole premise, and reality kind of starts to crumble. And that's the whole idea of the story, right? And so it's this dinner party, and there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie. It would be a very difficult synopsis. I do not want to deep dive into this just because the synopsis would be so fucking horrible.
Agreed, 100%.
Oh my God. We're like, meanwhile, the red people, meanwhile, the green people, meanwhile, the blue people, meanwhile, blue people number 2. I don't fucking know. And you'll get what I'm saying if you watch this movie, which I do recommend. It ends very well, in my opinion. It's like the opposite of some of these other movies where just, where they just start off so well and they kind of fall flat. This one starts off flat and ends off really well, in my opinion. And I ended up giving it 3.5 stars.
And I just checked on Letterboxd. I gave it 1/2 of a star more than you. So it was a 4-star movie for me.
Oh, okay.
And I think I did that just because I feel like it's a really well-made, well-acted movie. And I did like the ending so much. It totally redeemed it. When I talked about this on Shooting the Flames, several months ago, I talked about like how I felt I needed to have some sort of advanced degree in like astrophysics or something like that to like, and I was just like, no. I don't know. I mean, mean, like alternate realities and things like that. And I was just,
No, it's magic. It's not science. I mean, everything's centered around a fucking house. I mean, like physics doesn't follow plot lines. You know what I mean?
well, I'm no scientist. I mean, I have no idea what physics is. I mean, my God, I studied literature for God's sakes. We don't like to think about physics, let alone write about it. So I mean,
No, the science of this is really, really just stupid fiction. I mean, it's not even. So don't even feel bad about that.
but the ending, though, I mean, the ending is good. This is a good ending to a movie.
What did you rate The Invitation in contrast to Coherence?
Well, let me look it up. Hold on one second. Oh, I didn't rate it. How in the hell is that possible?
So I rated The Invitation 4 stars. So that's about half a point higher than what I rated Coherence. And to me, The Invitation just like works better as a whole. It's very, very constant, I feel like. The pacing's better. The beginning's just as good as the end. The end is just iconic, And so I feel like it works slightly better as a film. But Coherence definitely has earned its place in my list of recommendations.
I mean, and I would also rate The Invitation 4 stars. I mean, like I don't want to say that like the movies are equally as good, right? Even though I rate them the same. I mean, I have problems with each particular movie. I do enjoy The Invitation more, but the more that the story and Coherence started going and I saw where it was going and started to realize that some of the characters that were involved in what I was watching just then, I had never met before and things like that. It's very sort of like complex and like just interesting.
Yeah. The movie kind of like, to me, like at the beginning, I hated the characters, but the movie comes back later and kind of pats you on the head and is like, you're right, because there's other versions of, what's going on here. And I don't want to like spoil the plot. That's not really a spoiler because that becomes apparent fairly quickly, but it kind of redeems itself in that regard, which is why I ended up, instead of giving it like a 2 stars, I gave it a 3.5.
Oftentimes I will like hold my Letterboxd rating for a couple days before I like rate something. I want to think about it. And I think I gave this 4 stars like right away. And I'm okay with that. Like I kind of want to watch this movie again, even though I can't say that I didn't like it. It's just one of those movies where like, it's a good movie and it's a question between like and love. Maybe that's a better way to like put it. But
well, I feel like my ratings are, and anyone's ratings really should be like a living document.
Yeah.
Our thoughts and feelings change, just like our conversation on Psycho Beach Party. Back in the day, you might have rated that much higher than you do now. Just through different eyes. And sometimes you psychologically deal with stuff in a movie that, kind of unfurls itself after days or weeks or months, and you want to change your rating to something. But yeah, for right now, like that's my rating of Coherence. But I really, really love that we have a subgenre or the makings of a subgenre for Dinner Party,
Yes. I really love movies in tight situations with very small characters. You know what I mean? I'm all over it, right? I do have to ask you though, since we just talked about Psycho Beach Party and you talked about Nicholas Brendan just being Nicholas Brendan, right? And acting. Do you think that his acting in this movie was any better than Psycho Beach Party?
I would say his acting. Yeah. He's much more like naturalistic, I would say.
Okay.
But at the same time, that role seems completely based on him and his life. He plays an actor who has horrible problems with alcohol.
Yeah.
And, has had some life setbacks because of that. And that is Nicholas Brendan.
Yeah.
To a T. So
That's
they
right.
either stumbled into the perfect role for him or they wrote it for him for that. So I don't know, but he's had problems since that movie has come out with alcohol, so I don't know. It's just an interesting case of life imitating art and art imitating life, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I thought he was better in this, but he's still Nicholas Brendan,
One last final thought about Coherence before we move on. This is one of the few movies that I have seen without you that I wish that we had watched together. I think that this is one of the movies that if we would have watched it together at the very same time, we could have had a lengthy conversation afterward. Right. And I kind of regret
And you
that.
would have seen me almost Sarah Paulson a vase, or a glass into the wall or something.
So, I mean, maybe one day when we're ready to revisit Coherence, we'll just do it together and we'll see what comes out of that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I watched a movie that I would squarely consider a horror movie, leaning into horror adjacent.
Yeah.
But it is the Amazon Prime original, The Vast of Night.
And this is something that I think I watched it first and and told you that you needed to watch it? Or?
Yes, that's exactly right.
I was live texting you because I was like, this dialogue though, like this is all like one shot. It's introducing basically all these characters and the entire town all in just like one expert shot, and the dialogue is just so naturalistic.
Yes.
It's like, so it reminded me of Tarantino a little bit in his setups, and it's just done so well, and it really, really transports you to the time. And because I think this is 1940s, 1950s, I believe, and it centers around radio. You know, and, you know, the phone operators and it's just so interesting. It reminds me of Night Vale, which is also, of course, a podcast, you know, about a radio show in a spooky town where weird shit happens all the time. But this is like, it really, it also displays itself as like almost like a Twilight Zone episode.
Right. They frame it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Complete with intro, you know, and everything. And I just thought it was so well done. And I recommended it to, I recommended it to you. I was live texting you, but then I also recommended it to my family. And of course, my family, you know, likes really wrapped up with a bow endings, I think. And so they were just like, that was weird.
Oh, they didn't like it?
I didn't get much feedback. They were just like, nah,
so
it's weird.
This movie is so incredibly well acted, well written, well directed. I mean, just like everything about this movie to me is so good. Just like from the sets and like the art design and just like some of the camera work in this movie is so good. And I know they probably use like drones or something to film some of these things. But like if I were on the Academy like voting board for cinematography and I didn't list this movie in my choices, I mean, I something's wrong. I mean, like, this is such a good movie. Yeah. And everything about it. And mostly because, I mean, like, you can sort of pinpoint the movies that I like. Obviously, we talk about like small settings and small characters, you know, or small amounts of characters. And that's exactly what this movie gives you. I mean, we essentially have like two characters, and oftentimes they're by themselves, you know, maybe talking to each other, but like separated by, you know, a phone line or whatnot. But I think like some of the best work in this movie is from that actress who was playing that phone operator who like took over for her mom. I think it was just like so good. And I need to look up her fucking name.
So I believe you're talking about Sierra McCormick.
Yes.
And of course, Jake Horowitz did a huge amount of heavy lifting as well. But I think this is Andrew Patterson's directorial debut, you know, and I feel like it's like amazing. He financed it himself. He wrote the script under a pseudonym with someone else, and it was rejected by 18 film festivals.
What?
And finally premiered at Slamdance. And then, of course, it was acquired by Amazon and released in drive-in cinemas. And it's amazing. And I really, really like it. And I'm really looking forward to other things that this director does, because if this is his writing, directing debut, that he financed himself.
Yeah, he's got a lot of room to go. I mean, with some big budget studio money. I mean, if he stays true to like what his artistic visions are or whatever. I mean, and a lot of directors are doing that these days. They're taking the money and saying, well, I'm going to make the movie that I want to make. And I mean, this is like people that we respect, like Michael Dougherty and Mike Flanagan. I mean, like, we just take the money, make a big movie. I'm so interested to see what he does with it, because this small movie that he paid for himself is just better than some of the things that I've seen in the last like 4 or 5 years.
And it looks really good. The atmosphere is amazing. The casting that he managed to get was amazing. This I mean, everything about it. It just it screams talent. You know, and I just can't wait to see what he does next. And I hope he stays in the horror adjacent category for at least some time.
Yeah, so I really recommend this movie. If you have Amazon Prime, you need to go and watch it. If you are not watching it, you're doing yourself a disservice. I rated this 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, and I stand by that. I can't think of why I took that half star off. I think toward the end, I sort of like got a little disinterested in the story a little bit. I didn't know where it was going.
I gave it a 4 because I thought the ending was a little abrupt.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we share something there. I mean, like, it's really, really good. up until the very end. I mean, the very, very end. But up until then, it's just like a fantastic movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see myself watching this over and over again. I would love to see what this looks like on stage, even. You know, I can totally see it working in that way. But it's a great movie. And just an amazing directorial debut. So good.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much wraps up the horror movies that I have seen over the last month, but I do have a couple that I would consider horror adjacent.
Me too.
Good. I mean, so let's jump into those. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I finally saw Jojo Rabbit.
I just sucked all the oxygen out of my
And I rated it a 4.5 stars.
That's only half a star less than me. Okay, I want to know what you thought about Jojo Rabbit, because I fucking loved it.
And of course, this is Taika Waititi. He's behind, of course, What We Do in the Shadows, as well as Thor Ragnarok, which is Robert's favorite Marvel film, you know, among some other things. And Jojo Rabbit is kind of an unlikely film. Really, really it is. And, you know, no one would have thought this would have worked, but I can't imagine it working in anyone else's hands but Taika Waititi. I mean, he adapted that book to be a comedy more than it, you know, because I don't think it was before. He just put himself, injected a huge fucking gallon of himself into, that sounds gross, into this, and he won it. I believe he won an Oscar for writing.
Yeah.
For writing it. You know, best adapted, I believe, or something, or best original. I forgot. It is based on a novel, so I can't imagine it would have been original. But anyway, so everyone's great in this film. The little boy's great. Taika's great. He plays Hitler. Scarlett Johansson is amazing. I loved seeing a bunch of the other bit characters in this. There's a lot of familiar faces. It's funny. It's heartwarming. There's a lot of horror adjacency, but it's from the perspective of a little boy who's, you know, a little like Hitler youth or whatever, and learning that everything that he believes is evil, essentially. And, you know, his imaginary friend is Hitler. So Taika is not actually playing Hitler. He's playing this imaginary version of Hitler, and everything's kind of just, you know, through this little boy's eyes. And it's not like The Book Thief or something which you still need to see.
Yeah.
Which is through a little girl's eyes, but it's much more somber and melancholic. This is somber and melancholic, but very secondary to the just playful, interesting, ironic, you know, it's hard to compare it to anything, you know, but I would definitely say there's just moments of just outright laughter, as well as moments of, you know, tears and things like that. And it's done so expertly. So I would highly recommend, if any of you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, to go see it.
To quote Still Magnolias, one of my favorite emotions is laughter through tears, right? And like this movie sort of exemplifies that to me. And I really think that like the acting in this movie and the writing and the way the movie was made is phenomenal. I love Sam Rockwell. Like every time I see him in something, I think he's just a phenomenal actor. And the kid in this movie is also a phenomenal actor. And like Scarlett Johansson, like if she were going to win an Oscar for the 2 roles that she was nominated for last year, I would have hoped it would have been this one. I mean,
I don't know. Marriage Story was amazing for her. You know, that was such good acting. She's just an acting powerhouse this last year.
I mean, for real, anyone who discounted her, I mean, like, she is just good. I love this movie a lot. It was my second favorite of last year overall, actually. So, I just got to get you to see that first movie, that number 1 on my list from last year, and then we'll talk about that one later on.
And what is that one?
Little Women.
Oh, okay.
Little Women's so fucking good.
Okay. All right.
It just sounds like a quack.
It's on my list. Queer.
I know, right?
So any other horror adjacent ones that you've seen?
Yeah, so I watched a movie that I think we were looking forward to seeing together. We talked about it briefly on a Shooting the Flames, and we even considered doing this for our hot take in June, and that's the movie Shirley, starring Elizabeth Moss, you know, who we just like fawned over from The Invisible Man earlier this year.
And she was great in Us.
And also great in Us, and I like her very much.
Handmaid's Tale, Mad Men. She's great in everything she does.
At all. I mean, she is a really good actress, and this is no exception. And I was looking forward to watching this movie a lot because I love Shirley Jackson. I have read a huge chunk of her work, not all of it because it's kind of prolific, but I mean, lots of short stories, novels. I mean, she wrote The Haunting of Hill House, right? She wrote The Lottery, and these are just some pieces of literature that I like very, very much. And I was looking forward to seeing this movie because I thought that it was going to be a little bit more accurate. Right. And I think that this movie takes a lot of like liberties and sort of like, shows a fictitious version of actual events. And the movie also like sort of like takes this like psychosexual turn. There's lots of sex in this movie.
Interesting.
And it's not quite what I was expecting, but the acting was very, very good. And the way that the movie was shot was very, very good. It almost feels surreal in a way, almost like a Shirley Jackson story, right? But it's totally worth it just to watch Elizabeth Moss play Shirley Jackson. And the man who plays her husband was also very good, like the way they play off each other. It's an interesting film, and the director of this movie I've never heard of, but I did some research online, and people just really like her work a lot, and I have never seen any of her movies, never heard of them, so I think I need to go back and like do some watching and like sort of verse myself in what she has created. But this was a 3.5-star movie for me on Letterboxd. Like, it's total. Go check it out. Okay, it's on Hulu. I mean, it costs nothing to watch it, so why not?
Sweet. Another horror adjacent film on my list is Room, starring Brie Larson, which I believe I gave like a 4.5 star to. I really, really dug the shit out of that movie. I think a lot of, obviously she won a Best Actress Oscar for it.
Brie Larson, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's really done from the perspective, subtly done through the perspective of her child, who has grown up in this one room, like shack, not knowing the outside world because they are, kept captive by this, man, this rapist guy, that took her from the street, locked her in this room and habitually rapes her. She has this child, and that's the only room that this kid has known in all of his, 5 or 6 years. And it's the story of how they escape and, how they deal with, getting used to getting back into the world and for the first time for the child. And for better or worse, it really follows the perspective of the child. It doesn't really leave his side. If the mother has to go somewhere else, like the hospital or something else, it follows him and not her, And so I don't know if that's a mistake or not, but, I would have liked to follow her journey a little bit more because I feel like I was relating more to her. But overall, it's a very, very powerful movie, and I dug the shit out of it.
I've only seen this one time. I saw it in the theater, before the Oscars. During my Oscar catch up, I went to go see this with my cousin, who's a social worker.
Oh my God. This is a movie you have to watch like an intimate, like on a couch. Like, this is not a theater movie.
Because we were bawling the whole time. And, immediately afterward, this is what her training is in. And so we had to go get a beer and talk about the movie afterward. And it's very, very good. And Brie Larson is excellent in this movie. And Jacob Tremblay is even better, I feel. God. Like, he's just so good in this movie. But it's such a downer, right? And of course it had to be. This is what the subject matter is. But so good. So well acted. I
think that your experience with your discussions surrounding it and who you watched it with might be coloring your because I didn't feel like it was a downer, really. I feel like it, at the end, it really kind of looks forward and there's progress and, there's hope. There
is an uplifting and hopeful ending. You're right. And I think that maybe we were just sort of like focused on like and not even the greater chunk of the movie, because the greater chunk of the movie is dealing with the aftermath of her escape. Right. And I don't know. Maybe we were just focused on like being in that situation or like putting ourselves into that situation of how we would feel after we escape from that, room or whatnot. But I mean, it was good. It's just not a movie that I would walk away from like saying, I can't wait to watch it again, you know? But it was excellent.
I would watch it again just for the performances alone, honestly. And as a nerd point, I actually really loved seeing William H. Macy, as well as Joan Allen play husband and wife again, which they were in Pleasantville, which I really love that movie.
Oh, I forgot they were a couple in Pleasantville.
Yeah. Who split up, and the same kind of thing happens here. It's just really, really interesting that they paired those two up again.
I love Joan Allen so much.
Mm-hmm.
I just do. So, I watched a movie that has been on my list for a while, at least since last year. I think that, I don't know if we covered this trailer in Shooting the Flames, but I think that you and I may have talked about it separately, and that's the movie Loose, starring Octavia Spencer and Naomi Watts, as well as Tim Roth, who also played a couple in Funny Games
He's always good.
before. Yeah. And so,
So is she.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, Octavia Spencer is just so good in everything, but like especially this movie.
She's a national treasure.
For real. I mean, like,
did you ever see Ma?
I haven't seen Ma yet. It's like, it's on my list now. Like it's been on my list, but now I want to see it even more because I want to see her do something like different that she hasn't done before. But my God, she's so good in this movie. And I was thinking back on like the Oscar nominees of last year, and I was just like, why isn't Octavia Spencer here for this movie? It's just so good. The movie sort of focuses on a young African-American teenager who's been adopted by two white parents. So they sort of taken him from this war-torn country in Africa to give him a better life in America. And he's especially bright, and he's athletic, and he is charming. He's good at debate, right? He's just like the overall like good student, and everyone wants him to succeed and have a good life. And like his teacher, who's like a government or history teacher played by Octavia Spencer, is calling his parents because he's written some like really troubling things in essays, and she used that as an excuse to like search his locker, and she found fireworks, and she's just troubled by the path that he may be taking based upon his past. And I mean, like, I would put this in horror adjacency because, you know, there's so many differences of opinion going on in this movie, and you're trying to figure out like who's telling the truth and who is not.
Yeah, I remember the trailer. So it reminds me of that movie, Apt Pupil, based on the short story by Stephen King with Ian McKellen, where the kid is like the straight A, awesome person, you know, but might have this dark underbelly of weirdness that is much more manipulative than is at first sight. And it's like, who's the real bad guy here? And the trailer for Loose just kind of made me feel like there's some ambiguity and guesswork going on between like Octavia Spencer. Is she like the bad guy here? Like that's like trying to you do some weird manipulation, or is the kid actually, you know, having these like dark thoughts and urges and things like that and manipulations, or are they both in a way, you know? So it looks interesting.
And that's exactly the point of the movie. You know, it's just like trying to figure out like who you want to believe through the course of the story that's being told. I mean, this movie, like,
does it wrap up? Do you find out?
I mean, yeah, you do. And I think that that's what kept me from giving this a 5-star rating. I don't think that, I mean, I didn't really care for the ending so much, mostly because, you know, I grew to love these characters for all of their good and bad qualities. And I can't say that very often in a movie. Like there are points in this movie that I like characters for being bad, you know? Mm-hmm. And at some point, it starts to also be about like, how much do you trust your children, you know, because Naomi Watts goes on a journey, and it's just like, this is a really good movie with really good characters and really good acting that I think was supremely overlooked by the award circuit, mm-hmm. you know? And I mean, like, if not the general public, I know it's been on Hulu for a couple of months, and I don't see people talking about this movie, and I don't understand why. You know, it's got like big name people in it doing really like big name work. And
Oscar so white.
Yeah, for real. I mean, it's got to be it. I mean, because I mean, Octavia Spencer, as far as I'm concerned, she like blinks on camera, and you know she can get a nomination. She's been nominated several times, and won. And I don't know why this one's overlooked. I don't know. It just really boggles my mind. But it's a fantastic movie. I think that I texted you after I watched it, or even while I was watching it, and I was like, "You have to watch this movie. It's just so so good and so thrilling. I mean, it's kind of bare bones in its storytelling, but I was on the edge of my seat the entire fucking time. And I would put it in the horror adjacency category just because there's so many questions that you come up with while you're watching it. And I mean, it is a thriller, like at the end of the day. And so I also group thrillers into like the horror adjacency category. And so I can't recommend this movie enough. Like 4.5 stars for sure. So good. Octavia Spencer. If you want to read the phone book, I will come and film you. So just
Here.
I mean, come on.
Well, speaking of 4.5 star horror adjacency, I finally watched Logan, which is one of Fox's last X-Men movies, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of the way Fox has handled, X-Men and everything else throughout the years, throughout the decades, really. But this is kind of their bookend, their kind of final statement on their X-Men franchise. And it elevates it to, horror adjacency and to a hard R rating. And I was not expecting that. And I gave it a 4.5 stars. And it was not what I had expected. I'd heard a lot of people say really good things about it, but I was just kind of done with Fox and Marvel. Or at least Fox's treatment of Marvel, but I love how they handled, an older Professor Xavier who's, suffering from seizures. And I loved, kind of old man Logan approach. And I loved how they approached the girl that they're supposed to be kind of saving or taking care of. It's almost like a reverse Terminator movie, right? It does remind me of Upgrade. It reminds me of Terminator. It reminds me of really classic, 80s and early 90s, like action, sci-fi, horror thrillers, I just thought it was excellently done.
And it's been on my list to watch for a very long time, at least since, the year it came out. It seemed like it was a very good movie. It got a lot of Oscar buzz around it. And, I've been meaning to watch it. And so when I saw that you had watched it on Letterboxd and you mentioned it to me, I said, what the fuck? Let's watch Logan. And, I liked it. I don't think that I have I have not seen the most recent X-Men movies, like the last 2 or 3 that came out aside from Logan. I still haven't seen.
Don't.
And I don't really plan. I trust your judgment on that. And if it's a movie that's squarely in a genre that you like and you say it's not good, I'm like, I don't want to watch it. But Logan was nominated for an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, right? And so that says something. That's a fairly high award. And that's great for a comic book movie. And so, yeah, I watched it and I also enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised.
You said it was an excellent movie. You said you appreciated the violence and the meta qualities. And you said Patrick Stewart was phenomenal. And you said all the Oscar buzz around the performance was deserved. And then I looked at your Letterboxd score and it was a 3.5. And I was like, 3.5 is an excellent, sir. I see you.
I can repeat myself.
No,
God.
I had to air the conversation that we had on Messenger.
So here's the deal with Logan. Okay. I think it's good. I think it's well made. I think that his performance is phenomenal. All those things that I said. But for a huge chunk of this movie, several chunks of this movie, actually, I was incredibly bored. I was just like, okay, I don't say this very often, but ramp up the action. I know the violence was extreme, but I kind of wanted to see more of that. And there were just huge chunks of the movie that they were doing nothing, and I was just like, I don't know. It didn't hold my attention as well.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that, but we can agree to disagree, which is.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie either. I liked it. I would watch it again, and I watched it by myself too. I know that my husband would like this movie. I think I was watching it in the middle of the day or early in the morning or something like that. And, it's good. I was just kind of bored through pieces of it. But as far as comic book movies go and as far as X-Men movies go, I think that it's tops. It's equally, I kind of like X-Men 2 the best.
See, I went back and watched that and I was like, this is not as good as I remember it. Especially after watching Logan, and I actually gave it a 3 star because that was my favorite X-Men movie before that. And I went back and watched it and I was like, whoa, this isn't really aged well, but Logan was superior.
And I haven't seen them in a very long time, but I mean, like there were certain parts of this movie that I think are just phenomenal, and I wish that they could have cut like maybe like half an hour out of it, you know, or something. But the scene that I really liked the most was toward the end, and I don't want to give like way too much away, but there's a bunch of mutants sort of like using all of their powers at one time, right? And I just like really fucking loved that. Like, that's what I wanted to see most of.
They kind of gangbanged one of the people, you know. Yeah,
I mean, like they're hinting around other mutants, and I know there's not supposed to be that many in this movie, but I kind of like to see a whole bunch of mutants at one time, you know. And that's why I like the other X-Men movies too, because they're characters that I know and love already, but these were new characters, and I sort of wanted to see like more of what they could do and the other mutants that were still around. And I don't know. I mean, like it was really good. I don't want you to think that I don't like this movie, because I really did. And I disagree with you. I think 3.5 is an excellent rating.
Well, what adjective would you use for 4 or 4.5 or 5 if 3.5 is excellent?
It's a fucking perb. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, like 3.5 to me is excellent. I think 3 is kind of excellent, and 4 is like phenomenal, and 5 is just like astronomical or something. You know what I mean? But
so yeah, to me, like 2.5 is meh, and then like 3 is good. 3.5 is very good.
I don't watch movies all the time and think I just really disliked that movie. You know, I need to go back and see what I rated 1 star. I'm fairly certain I haven't done that ever. So, I mean, I think that 3.5 is it's
hard to make a 1-star movie, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree, but I think that 3.5 is a really excellent rating. I would say 3 is good and 3.5 is excellent. I don't know. It's that half star that sort of hinges on it. Although I don't know. We could further this discussion and this argument like off mic.
No, we rate things differently, and that's completely fine.
Well, that sort of wraps up my horror adjacent movies. I watched 2 more things that they're not horror in my opinion.
Okay.
So one of them is a movie that I should have seen. I'm at least like for 20 years now plus. Mm-hmm. And it's a movie that my co-host and best friend Chris has told me to watch on more than one occasion, but it took a listener to call me out on social media to make me finally watch it. So thank you, Nikki at phillyenginerd. I watched The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yay! Finally.
And my God, what a good fucking movie this is.
No. Yeah, it's a solid 4 stars for me. It's just a classic. I love the team up of Samuel L. Jackson and Gina Davis. I feel like their chemistry is just amazing. I want to see them together and more stuff.
I was so pleasantly surprised by this movie. I don't know why I poo-pooed this movie for so long. I think that when it was marketed to me when I was a teenager, I was just like, oh, it's just another action movie. I don't care, whatever. But when I sat down to watch this, I was maybe like 15 or 20 minutes in, and I was already like messaging Chris going like, what the fuck am I watching? This is so good. I mean, it's so like ridiculous in the best ways. I mean, like once they hit that fucking deer and its legs were kicking inside the windshield a la Cabin Fever, I was like, I love this movie.
And there are some iconic action sequences in this, especially near the end. And the movie starts and it's fairly innocent, almost like just run-of-the-mill family, you know, type of situation. And then by the end, you're in this hardcore action movie, you know, and all the wacky hijinks that happen in between to make that happen. And Brian Cox, again, is amazing in this movie.
Yes.
You know, and there are some other, you know, recognizable faces, but it's just a really well-paced, great classic action movie. You know, with thriller elements, there's some horror adjacency on there. You know, I really love this movie.
I loved the just interactions between Gina Davis and Sam Jackson are just so good. Like they're so good together. And I mean, I like them both in other movies, and I just don't know why I didn't watch this. However, I have long seen this movie thrown onto lists of Christmas films, and I want to know where you stand on this.
More
is this
than
a Christmas movie?
You know, and so I watched it, and you'd kind of mentioned that, and I was like, you know, there is Christmas kind of sprinkled throughout this whole thing. You know, it doesn't center around Christmas. It's not about Christmas, but it happens kind of in and around Christmas. So yeah, I might put it up there. To me, it's almost more to do with Christmas than like Die Hard, you know? So yeah, she's in a Christmas fucking parade.
I agree. And there's Christmas music in it. You know what I mean? Like I love to like find off the wall movies that are around Christmas to watch. Like I'm not the kind of person who wants to sit down and watch It's a Wonderful Life every year. I want to watch Gremlins, you know, I want to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I can totally see myself throwing The Long Kiss Goodnight into my like December month watch list. You know, I squarely think it's a Christmas movie. And I think that makes it even more special than what it already is.
Yeah. And it's also special because they could have easily just tried to make this like a badass action movie or whatever, but they really know and strike a tone with humor and wackiness. Yeah. You know, I love it when she kicks Samuel Jackson out of the car and just lays there on the pavement, lights a cigarette, you know, invites him back in. You know, there's just like weird, you know, moments like that are just completely wacky and unrealistic, you know, in the action beats and other things. But it sells it and it knows itself and it just works.
Agreed. So I have to thank you for always suggesting this movie. And I especially have to thank Nikki for like pushing me into watching it. And she didn't even like intend to push. It's a bad adjective or it's a bad verb. But I'm so glad that you like said, how could you have not seen this movie? Because I agree. How could I have not seen this movie? So... I did watch, so you know that I'm not the most like episodic person. I like my stories to be told in a good like 3 hours or less for the most part. But there are certain things that I just never miss. And those are RuPaul's Drag Race and Project Runway. And Amazon has a original series sort of like based on Project Runway. It's got Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn in it, and it's making the cut. And I sat and watched all of it. I know that it's not something that you would enjoy. It's all like fashion and like fashion design and like garment creation and things that I can't do.
You were like the third person to tell me that, including my boss. You know, I'm just not, I can't, like, it seems so frivolous and weird to center drama around that I can't watch these things and just like take it seriously. I just can't. I don't know why.
It's not for everybody. I am not the most fashionable person at all. I think you would completely agree with that. Like, I don't buy things that are fashionable. I have my own personal sense of style that sort of stems from like 1997, and I've just carried it over for the last like 20 years. But I love to watch shows where they like make things or do things that I can't do. I don't watch like Master Chef or whatever because I can cook. I don't care what people are cooking. I like to see people do things that I can't do. And I like Project Runway because they have to make intricate garments in like a day or two. But this show is really about creating a brand. And I think the reason I liked it the most is that like you could buy the clothes immediately after the episode was over. So it made it accessible to me, even though they create clothes for women, you know. But I mean, there's lots of like, and it was global. So it's like, lots of different people from different countries and all around the world. And there's lots of queer voices in this. And it was just really fun. And I will continue to watch Project Runway and Making the Cut and things like that. I really enjoyed these shows.
Well, I need to check it out at this point. I've already promised that I would. I'll check out the first episode and see what it's all about. But maybe I need to just spank my like inner masculine moppet or something in order to just deal with it. But, you know, good TV is good TV, so I'll check it out.
I will say for a reality show, like these were very likable characters. Like I wanted more than one person to win, right? And I think if you're watching a competition show and it doesn't matter who wins, I think that speaks very highly of it.
That's one thing I hate about reality is just like the petty dramas. That's what I didn't like about the first part of Coherence. You know, I hate stupid people and situations with heightened drama that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, then you will like this because this is one of the reality competition shows where there's a few moments of drama sprinkled in, but by and largely these people all get along. They created a family and the music is really cool. I have pulled up the Spotify playlist for this and have listened to it, and it's just like good. It's a well-made show, and it's in like ultra high def, so everything looks great, right? And it's just, I mean, it's good. I mean, I don't expect you to watch it. Mm-hmm. I don't expect you to like it, you know, but I really enjoyed it. I got Rob to watch 2 episodes, and I think that he was kind of involved. He liked to look up the winner before the judging happened to see which one I liked the best and how it mapped up to them. And then to see if we could buy the clothes. And right now they're all sold out, but there's some things that I've picked out that I want to own. So I don't know, but that's the last thing that I watched in June. I took a great chunk of it because it takes me a while to watch episodic things, but I really enjoyed the shit out of it. And as far as like Pride Month goes, I think it's great to watch a movie or TV show with so many different queer people in it from all around the world. It was just so good and made me happy.
Well, since you were doing all your, gay shit, I was over here doing all this ultra masculine stuff, like watching old Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and Gloria Swanson movies. Just to provide contrast.
That's right. You barely celebrated Pride Month. How dare you?
So I've been trying to catch up on these movies, right? So I watched The African Queen with Katharine Hepburn. I watched Philadelphia Story, which is like a younger comeback movie for Katharine Hepburn. I watched Dark Victory with Betty Davis. And wow, that was something that I didn't expect. And Sunset Boulevard I had never seen with Gloria Swanson and I'm Ready for My Close-Up, Mr. DeMille. And that's kind of a film noir, kind of, I don't know if it's even horror adjacent, but it's almost like thriller adjacent, I guess, far adjacent. But it's interesting. I don't know if I'm going to watch any of these again. Of these four, I probably liked the Philadelphia Story the most.
So I've said before in the podcast, my father wanted me to watch some older movies as he learned that I was a cinephile or whatever you want to call it. He was like, you have to watch the older stuff before you watch the new stuff. And I'm like, nah. But, I've seen 3 of these. I have not seen Dark Victory.
So it's about this woman who has, I guess, like a brain tumor and doesn't have she gets dizzy and headaches and doesn't, have all the feeling on one part of her body, but she's like this young socialite. She doesn't want to, admit to anything. Finally, she has surgery, saves her life. But the doctor and her best friend come to a realization that she's going to die anyway. She's going to go blind. And then within an hour, she will be dead. Right. And so she's given 4 to 6 months to live. She falls in love with the doctor and ends up marrying him. They still don't tell her, and finally she finds out and there's some drama, but then it ends, with a dark victory. So I expected it to be more like a thriller based on that title, or something. Mm-hmm. But no, it's more like, triumph over one's own fate or something. I don't fucking know. But it wasn't what I expected, and it was all right. Like I said, I think the Philadelphia Story was the best journey for characterization. I felt like there's a nice, middle, beginning, and end. And we had seen, Lion in Winter fairly recently, and of course we saw Suddenly last summer, and that all of that has made me want to kind of go back and see some of these people's, famous movies. So I had never seen African Queen, Philadelphia Story, or Sunset Boulevard before, especially Sunset Boulevard. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about with that. I loved seeing some of those. Hedda Hopper plays herself in that movie.
Really?
Yeah. And so does Cecil B. DeMille. He plays himself in that movie. And so it was just really interesting to kind of see Hollywood kind of comment on itself at this time in 1950. This is, 6 years before he'd make the 10 Commandments and 9 years before he died. So it was really interesting to see him in that and to kind of start tying everything together. I do want to go and see Now Voyager with Betty Davis.
I've never seen that.
I just want to see some of these earlier things. I also want to see their follow up to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which was Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. I have never seen that. I want to see, Joan Crawford's, Axe movie or whatever that had come out.
Oh, what the fuck is that movie called? I love that movie too.
Yeah. But, I want to see all of these, and I want to kind of go through. I want to see Cool Hand Luke. I've never seen a lot of these movies, that are older.
We'll spit my beer out.
Yeah, Cool Hand Luke's a little different. We're skipping a couple decades into the future, but
so good.
I haven't seen any of these. I haven't seen Rebel Without a Cause. I haven't seen, a lot of these. So I need to go back and watch.
Well, and I do too. Because I saw these movies when I was a teenager or a preteen for the most time. My father would sit down, we're going to watch The African Queen. And he would go and buy the VHS movie for us to sit down and watch together. And I just have not seen it since. And he talks about these movies and these actors all the time. He really will sit down and by himself and just watch hours and hours of Turner Classic Movies. And he's well versed in old cinema. And I feel that I'm not. So I need to go back and like rewatch some things. And, we just talked about in our deep dive into Psycho Beach Party about how like 20 years time can change the way you feel about a movie. And like as a teenager, you sit down and be like, I don't want to watch this. This is not what I want to see. It's not stylized like today's movies are or whatever. And I think that I would appreciate a lot more of it if I watched it now as a 40-year-old man. Right. So I need to see the things that I haven't seen. I need to rewatch some. And I really feel like I need to rewatch some like classic horror too. I mean, like, as far as the Film Flamers go, we haven't done like classic horror yet as a deep dive.
No, I think we want to kind of ease into that.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like I need to go back and just watch some of these movies that are considered like really classic, and just gauge my opinion on them. But I always poo-poo old movies until I sit down and watch it, and I love it. I mean, just. So I'm fairly certain that I could sit down and watch, Sunset Boulevard or Dark Victory or any of the movies just listed and just enjoy myself immensely. So I think I need to start peppering those into my watch list a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that was a long conversation about movies that we have watched.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a nice 1.5 hour long episode for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it wasn't too much.
And I hope that you guys enjoyed the longer conversation about it. So oftentimes Chris and I will watch like this amount of movies in a month, maybe less, maybe more sometimes, depending on what's going on. But we pick and choose the things that we've watched to talk about in Shooting the Flames. And this was sort of a exercise in what we would do if we wanted to talk about the things we have watched at length.
Yeah. And if you've lost track like we have, check the show notes right here on this episode to see a list of all the movies that we've talked about and the links to go watch them.
And if you liked this new format of episode, you can reach out to us on social media at The Film Flamers on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
You can email us at tiredqueens@filmflamers.com or call our hotline at 972-666-7733. Leave us a voicemail with what you thought or basically anything that comes to mind, and we'll put it on our next Shooting the Flames episode and respond to it there.
That's right. We also like to talk about our new patrons and reviews on Shooting the Flames. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you can leave a review, do so. We'll read it on the episode. And go to patreon.com/thefilmflamers to find all of our bonus episodes, including the one for June, where we flash back to Suddenly Last Summer, so another classic film that we talked about.
We are still taking submissions for our survey. We haven't really gotten any new ones over the last 2 episodes, so please check the show notes and take that survey. Swerve over to the side of the road if you're driving. Just take it. Takes a minute. Do it, please. It helps us out a great deal.
If you're in traffic, you could do it with every press of the brake.
Yeah. It's pretty much all multiple choice. Just do it.
Yeah.
Please.
So we still have Shooting the Flames coming out next week, and in July we are covering 2 of our shared favorite horror movies, Alien and Aliens, and a special top 10 coming for you, so stay tuned in July. But until then, I think that we have more movies to watch to add to our growing list. So until then, sweet dreams. Did you ever just suck my lip right now? What the fuck?
Sweet dreams.